going to continue what we started this morning. Talking about the prayer of pain. And what we are doing in this particular study is learning to think through and to pray the way that Jesus did. And learning to take our pains to God. Now this is, as we said this morning, not an instance that says, you should ignore medical advice, you should ignore needs and individuals that can help you in certain specialized ways. This is simply one of many things that we can do to help us in the midst of difficulty. And one of the things that we see is that pain is common to the human experience. And God shows us throughout Scripture one of the ways to handle it, and that is to work through that grief with Him. And so we talked about this morning three individual examples, Zechariah or Zacharias, depending upon your translation, and Elizabeth, the parents of John the Baptist in Luke 1, then Jesus in the garden in Luke 22, and then Jesus on the cross in Luke 23. And so tonight I want us to look at four principles that I think we can see that are pretty apparent as we walk through this particular section. So number one, the first one is that there are many causes of pain. Many causes. Physical pain. I know that there have been a number of people who have experienced extended hospital stays, those who have been in comas, those who have gone through a number of different physical struggles. And certainly praying in those times. There are emotional traumas, experiences that can leave us scarred and damaged, certainly altered. There are spiritual traumas that a lot of times when people talk about abuses that can take place in churches, many times they're dealing with, even most recently, some of the scandals that have gone on in covering up for individuals who abused members in a local church, and then there was kind of a hush that covered it, and it was a pretty bad problem in many places. But even beyond that, there is also a spiritual abuse that can take place. People who are entrusted to lead the people of God can abuse the people that are entrusted to their care. And they can mistreat them, they can bully them, they can do a number of different things under the guise of spirituality, and the amount of pain that inflicts is really, really hard to communicate, and it's really, really hard for people to struggle and to wrestle with. And so, when we look at the examples here, Zacharias and Elizabeth, they're dealing with infertility. They cannot have a child, and the pain that went along with that, and social stigmas and different things. Jesus in Luke 22, he literally feels the weight of the world on his shoulders. He feels the weight of the sins of the world. Matthew's account, as he describes it, says that when he entered into the garden, he began to be sorrowful, and he was very heavy. The idea of it was weighing him down. He already said earlier in Luke 12:50 that he was in distress. He felt pressed by what he was about to endure. And so you have that particular issue. And then in Luke 23, we see him being persecuted and mistreated by people. And so you see that there are a multitude and various ways in which we can suffer. Okay? And the question is not if we will suffer, it's when we suffer and what we will do with our suffering. Okay? What we will do with our suffering. There is a reason why some people are able to suffer and they become stronger, better people. And some people suffer and all they become is all the more bitter. And I'm not one who's making a judgment on that. I'm not one who's saying I understand people's experiences. I don't. But that is a stated fact in reality. Okay? You can study people like Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of the Holocaust, the leading developer in the psychological field of logotherapy. You can look at people from all across the board who have suffered what we would consider to be the greatest of atrocities. And it's them speaking into this as well. not just what God has said all along, but what they are speaking from their own experience, and helping us and learning to deal and process pain, okay, with a way that is constructive. So sometimes when we experience pain as children, sometimes we are taught from a young age to suppress the pain, right? Now look, we've all dealt with and we've all been whiny kids, okay? There's a difference between a kid when they're just whining and it hurts. Look, that's a hangnail on your skin. Cool it. But you know, a lot of times we're looking at them and they're experiencing something significant and we're just saying, hey, get over it, toughen up. One of the things that we need to be cautious of is that we are not depositing within them this notion that says pain is something you ignore. Because pain is not something you need to ignore. And so we have this tendency sometimes when our kids are, especially when we're in the teenage years and the kids are talking about how hard their life is or how tough their problems are. And listen, as the same thing with a small child, some of those things are completely ridiculous, okay? At the other point, many of those things are very legitimate. And we look at them sometimes as an adult and we say, hey, what you're worrying about, that's not a big deal. And one of the things we're telling them is that, or one of the opportunities that we are missing is this. We are missing the opportunity to sit down and to teach our children to process pain and to work through it. We teach them to ignore pain. We teach them to suppress it. They'll do it their whole lives. And whenever they feel pain, they will feel like, as we said this morning, they're simply trying to get a pity party. Or they're weak because their pain is getting to them. Instead of having the strength to look at their pain and to attack it head on. And that's one of the things that we're seeing here. Zacharias and Elizabeth, they're struggling. What do? They take it to God. Jesus is struggling in the garden. He takes it to God. Jesus is literally struggling for his life on the cross. He's taking it to God. He's continuously taking his pain and processing it. And so if pain is inevitable, and it can come in many forms, then doesn't it necessitate then that we learn to process it? So we need to be careful and we need to understand and normalize and accept that. And one of the ways we do that is dealing with our pain with God. Number 2, the idea is simply keep coming. Keep coming. And we'll talk about this in more detail in a few weeks when we talk about the need to be persistent in prayer. But when you think about Zacharias and Elizabeth, and when the angel says to him in Luke 1 and verse 13, your prayer is heard. How many times do you think Zachariah and Elizabeth had prayed about this issue? Probably impossible to count, right? But they just kept coming. Jesus, when he's in the garden, you know, some people can sometimes, I think they mean well, I'm going to at least say that. They communicate to people that if you ask God more than once for something, then that must mean that you don't trust him to give it to you. Well, Jesus didn't know that. Because Jesus goes into the garden and on 3 occasions, he's asking the same thing. And he's praying more earnestly and pressing into it harder each time. Then when you look at his statement on the cross, the prayer that he uttered, Lord, into your hands I commit my spirit, and then you take many of the other statements like, my God, why have you forsaken me? And several other of those 7 final sayings that we have littered across the 4 Gospels, and what they are really prayers. He just keeps coming. As waves of pain wash over him, it leads him to different and varying emotions and different and varying prayers. As that pain washes over him, he will cry out, why have you forsaken me? He can feel the sense of frustration. As his life is being drawn from his body, as he is about to die, He will also feel a different pain that says, God, I trust you. But you see multiple levels of pain coming in different waves, and every one of them, he's taking it back to God. This is how I feel. This is what is going on. This is what is happening. Now, in order for us to understand that, as we said this morning, you have to forget and remove the notion that prayer is transactional. Because for too long, that is what we have believed about prayer. I have a need. I take it to God. He either says yes or no. He either gives me what I want or he doesn't. That's problematic, to say the least. Prayer is relational. Prayer is relational. It's not just about getting something from someone. If we're in a relationship and all we're ever doing is taking from someone, that's like giant red letters. There's a problem here. But if we're in a relationship with someone, there's a reason why we might have mentioned this recently, we don't sit down on a public bench somewhere next to someone we do not know and we just spill our guts. Everything on our minds, in our hearts, everything we've ever done, every emotion we've ever had, we just dump it on this unsuspecting stranger. We don't do that. At least most people don't, okay? The ones that do, there's obviously some issues that are going on, okay? But why don't we do that? We don't have a relationship. We don't trust them. Who you trust the most is who you tell the most to. There's a reason why husbands and wives share things that nobody else is ever going to know. And there's a reason why with God you share things that nobody else is ever going to know. And so the point is that you keep coming, even if what I'm asking for is for the pain to be alleviated, something bigger is happening in the process. God is listening, and I am processing my emotions. And one of the things that happens, the way our minds work is this: when we experience discouragement and trauma and other things, we sit on it, and it stews in our minds, and it spins, and it spins, and it spins, and we keep thinking about it all the time. In every way possible, we just spin. It's like I can't get it off my mind, we say. But when we actually have to form words, and this is why some people encourage journaling, other way, it's all, whether it's journaling or sitting down and talking with someone, what you're doing is you're forcing those thoughts out of your brain, okay? You're forcing them out of your brain, you're giving some coherence to them, and you're thinking through it. You're processing. Everything else, it's like a hamster on a wheel. You're just spinning. You're not going to get anywhere. Now, one of the things when it comes to finding someone who can help us process these issues, if you sit down and talk to someone who is a trained counselor or a therapist or a psychiatrist or whoever it may be, the next big hurdle is trying to find somebody you can trust who shares similar values and convictions with you. Because their advice, depending upon how they see the world, that will determine how they help me, the advice that they give me. And not all advice is created equal. And while there are good Christian counselors, there are good counselors that can help us and be with us, as we work through and process our pain with God, you've got the perfect counselor. You've got someone in counseling who not only knows what's going on, he knows what's going on inside of you better than you do. You don't see it. He sees it. And a counselor is simply, what all counseling really is designed to do is not even to give you answers. It's to draw out answers you already know inside of you. and to help lead you to your own result. Okay? So people say, then what does this have to do with the idea of keep coming to God? Well, if you view it merely as transactional, then yeah, you're going to get frustrated. But if you view it as relational, and you understand that you're building a close relationship with God and you're steadily processing it, you understand why it's important to keep coming. Because you dumped out what was on your mind this time, but tomorrow's another day. And there are more things to fill it. And there are new challenges. After you work through that initial set of challenges, there will be a second set of challenges and a third set of challenges. As you work out the way those things and the solutions that are developed, as you work those out, there will be new challenges. And you're constantly bringing them to God and emptying them out. That's why Hannah said in 1 Samuel 1:15, that's why the superscription of 102 says, pouring out our souls before the Lord. Pouring out our complaint before the Lord. Just taking it and dumping it out. Empty your cup. What's interesting, if you've ever sat with someone, I remember sitting with a kid one time who was, she was maybe more like 14 at the time. But when I found her, when I was called and I went to their house, and I found her in the living room, and she was sitting down and just rocking and having trouble breathing. Something had happened. She was having trouble processing it, and she just started. And so you go through a number of different things to get them comfortable. But what's interesting is always, regardless of the situation, when she finally got the first word out, it was like a tidal wave. One feeling, one emotion, one word. Whereas one moment she's bottled up, the next moment it's like a tidal wave, and every bit of it just comes flowing out. See how pent up that can be. And it rendered her without the ability to speak, without the ability to function. But by the time I left that night, she was laughing and cutting up with her family. I'm not saying that I gave her all I didn't really do anything but sit there and listen to her. But you see the process of when you pour your soul out, when you get out what it is that's weighing you down, there's a sense of freedom that comes with that. God has known that all along. And when you take that and you put it down in front of God, where you can say things, which is what we'll talk about in just a minute, you can say things that really you wouldn't say to anybody else. There's freedom and liberty in that. And so keep coming back, keep processing. Number 3, release your emotions. When you look at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, as we set the scene this morning where he goes and he falls down to his knees, perhaps collapsing under the weight that he's feeling. Some of the other gospel accounts, the synoptics, have him falling down flat on his face. Hebrews 5 and verse 7 has him praying with loud cries and tears. And one of the things that a lot of people would say to him is, hey, get it together. Do you see that notion that we're afraid of? There are many people who would seriously have looked at Jesus and said, you need to get it together. You got to get a grip. The idea of releasing the emotions, number 1, being open. This is how I feel. What's interesting is Christian people really struggle with this because how they feel, they know they think in their minds, I'm not supposed to feel that way. And so they end up spending, it's interesting, you have a conversation, they say, now look, I'm just so mad at them. Now I know I'm not supposed to feel that way. And at some point you have to look at them and say, stop qualifying it and just say it. You're mad at them. That's fine. That's fine. We'll work on how to process it later. You need to get it out. First of all, you're mad at them. They hurt you. That's logical. That makes sense. Maybe it's not even something that hurt us. It's just the fact that it hurts. It's just being open. It hurt. I don't understand. I don't know why. I understand nothing about this situation. Being open about it. Honest. Being honest. As we said, we talk about anger. People say, oh, you can't be angry in prayer. You think God doesn't know it? What do we think we're hiding from Him? He knows I'm angry. What good's it going to do in trying to hide it? And we can even, and by the way, people say, you know, how can I say in prayer, God, they make me so mad and I want to hate them, or I do hate them? Okay. What I want you to do is go read these psalms that are called imprecatory psalms, where you literally have got people asking God to kill other people, to punish other people. Open, honest, direct. Asking for it. Asking specifically for what I want to see in the situation. I'm not there dictating to God. There's a difference between me coming to God and saying, this is the situation and this is what I want to see happen. There's a difference between that and saying, God, it either turns out this way or it's over. Those are two different things. But when it comes to individuals, for an example, if someone is very sick and we're praying for them and we want them to live. Listen, why are we so afraid to look at God and say, I want them to live? I want them to live. I don't want to imagine my life without them right now. I'm not telling you you have to let them live. I'm not telling you that if it doesn't turn out the way I want it, that I'm done with you. I'm just telling you I want them to live. And you hear people qualify it and they say, I know it seems selfish of me to ask you to let them live. It does not sound selfish. It's what you want. People say, you can't do that. What did Jesus say? This is what I want. Let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not what I want, but what you want. He was very open, he was honest, and he was direct. And that's why it's so very important in prayer to release the emotions, to get rid of the stoicism and the strong face and everything else that goes along with it. Look, if we serve a God we cannot pour ourselves before, we don't have a chance. Number 4, last one. Answers to prayer vary. They vary. When you look at Zacharias and Elizabeth, how long had they been praying? Probably a long time. What was God's answer to their prayers? Well, obviously, showing how it turned out, the answer was apparently something like this: wait, but yes. Wait, but yes, I'm going to give you what you asked for. When Jesus prayed in the garden, let this cup pass, what was the answer? In capital letters, it was no. And when he prayed on the cross for his hands to be delivered into the faithful hands of God to be judged, the answer was a resounding yes. I will judge you faithfully. The answers to prayer are going to vary. And one of the things we've got to understand in the midst of it is this. What about pain and suffering? It's one of the oldest objections to Christianity is if a good God, a loving God, then why evil, pain, and suffering in the world? And basically the argument goes like this. There is pain in this world. And because I cannot in my mind see a purpose or anything good coming out of pain, it must mean that there's nothing good that can come from it, and it must disprove the idea of a good God. It's a little arrogant, isn't it? It's a little arrogant to say, because I can't see that there is anything good that could ever come from pain, then there must not be one. I don't understand at all in my life how a right answer can come from a mathematical formula. Don't understand it. Furthermore, don't really care to understand it. But does that then give me the right to say, well, math is stupid, it doesn't exist, it doesn't make any sense? So I was reading last night, before we went to bed. I was in our bedroom. We've got a sitting area that Brooke has allowed me to turn into my reading area, where I've got my chair and stacks of books. And so there's this book I've been reading on for several years. It's because it's kind of disjointed in the sense that it's like independent letters that were written. Eric Greishens, who was a Navy SEAL, governor of Missouri for a while, he has a PhD in philosophy from Oxford. And anyway, he was writing this. He does a lot of work with veterans, and he was writing this to one of the guys in his SEAL team who was having trouble reacclimating to everyday life. And so he writes 20-something letters to him about a whole host of subjects. And the one I read last night was on mentors and how to choose the right mentors. But he said something in here about pain that I think is important here. He said this: good teachers are comfortable with their students being uncomfortable. Yet they understand that a confrontation with weakness, with ignorance, with pain is not an end but a beginning. Awareness of our weakness opens a gateway to insight. Understand that. You have to push people to their limits to where they get to the end of themselves, where they can no longer rely on all these notions they've built in their head. And once you push them there, then you've got their brain open, and now it's time to teach them. But a lot of times you got to spend a lot of time convincing people they don't know what they think they know. And until you can get them to that point, you can't teach them. He says this: bad and brutal trainers can inflict pain, but they have no idea how to tie the hardship they have created to the excellence that their students aim to achieve. They have brought the trainee to the place of insight, but they can't unlock the gate. Embarrassed and confused by their own inability, they usually just keep shouting. A coach who is always shouting usually communicates one thing: I'm out of control. So what is he saying? Pain is a powerful tool of transformation at the most fundamental level. But it matters who is administering the pain and how they are helping you to process it. He'll go on to say, there are certain team leaders in the SEALs that can push you and absolutely destroy you physically, mentally, emotionally. But that's all they know how to do. And then there are the others who can push you mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and destroy you. And from that, then they can remake you. One of the things that praying in pain does is it takes our pain and it puts it in the hands of a God who knows how to use it. And who can, with that pain, that pain that has been inflicted upon us that is deconstructing us, he can take the ashes of that and construct something else. That's what the prayer of pain is about. Learning. You know, it's real easy for us to hear someone talk about, you know, life is fragile. And we'll hear it and say, yeah, that's right. But don't we hear it a little bit differently when we just lost somebody we loved? That pain brings insight. God's answers to our prayers as we are in pain may vary. But every one of them is good. Just because I don't see it, I don't understand how this pain will then turn into something good. I don't understand that. But as long as the one that's entrusted with my care does, then I can learn to live with it. So, we're all going to experience pain. The only thing we're trying to say here is, take your pain to God. I'm not saying don't take it. I'm not saying don't get help. I'm not saying don't seek out other people. I believe God uses those avenues. But don't shut him out. Don't shut him out. He's your greatest asset. And he desires to help you. And if you'll take your pain to him, you'll put it in the hand. If you take your pain anywhere else, you're taking a chance. You take your pain to God, you can take it to the bank. He's going to take it and build something with it. It's the way he's always done it. And so if a person tonight is struggling with pain, whether that's the pain of sin, physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain, whatever it may be, take it to God. And if we can help you in that process, we want to. This is an opportunity, not the only one, but it is an opportunity for us to pray together. Or if it's something we want to deal with more privately, we're happy to do that as well, or just at any other time. And if we can help you tonight, we want to as we stand and sing this song.